Imagine holding a penny so ordinary it once rattled unnoticed in a car's cup holder, yet today it commands whispers of $4 million. Not a gold bar, not a stock certificate, a single copper coin dated 1969, stamped with a small letter D, quietly minted in Denver at the height of America's space-age ambition. Most people would flick it across a counter without a second thought. But somewhere, maybe closer than you think, one of these pennies changed a life forever. And the uncomfortable question is, is a broken bar? What if you already owned it and never knew? In 1969, the United States was glued to television screens watching astronauts walk on the moon. Factories hummed, wallets were thin, and pennies mattered. The Denver Mint struck hundreds of millions of Lincoln cents that year, each one meant to be identical, predictable, disposable. Perfection was the goal, but history has a habit of slipping through cracks, and sometimes the smallest mistakes become the most powerful stories. One subtle deviation, invisible to the untrained eye, would turn an everyday cent into one of the most coveted modern coins in American history. Here's where things get uncomfortable, because the truth is this: almost everyone misses it. The 1969 Lincoln cent doesn't announce itself. It doesn't shine brighter. It doesn't feel heavier in your palm. In fact, the very reason people overlook it is the same reason it becomes priceless. And that's the fear collectors quietly live with: a broken bar, the fear that the coin that could have changed everything already passed through their hands. Picture a man in the early 1970s, emptying his pockets at the end of a long workday. Loose change hits the table, pennies scatter, among them, a 1969 cent. He doesn't know that decades later, coins like this would ignite bidding wars, forensic examinations, and sleepless nights among elite collectors. He doesn't know that one confirmed example, authenticated and verified beyond doubt, would later be valued in the multi-million-dollar range, approaching $4 million. He sweeps the pennies into a jar. End of story. Or so it seems. Fast forward to today. That same year, 1969, has become a pressure point in the rare coin world. It's spoken about in hushed tones at conventions, behind closed doors at auction houses, and late at night by people who suddenly realize that their childhood piggy bank may have been a vault in disguise. The 1969 penny sits at the center of this tension, because it represents something dangerous and exciting at the same time: hidden wealth hiding in plain sight. Now, let's reset your attention for a second. Be honest. When was the last time you actually looked at a penny? Not glanced. Looked. If you're like most Americans, it's been years. That's not laziness, that's conditioning. We've been trained to believe pennies are worthless, and that belief is exactly what allows fortunes to slip through fingers unnoticed. The story takes a darker turn when experts explain why certain 1969 pennies became legends. Under magnification, details emerge that were never supposed to exist: subtle doubling, alignment anomalies, die characteristics so rare they border on impossible. These are not the cartoonish errors people imagine. These are surgical, microscopic deviations that only appear when something went very wrong at the mint. And wrong, in this world, can mean priceless. Collectors who understand this live with a constant sense of urgency, because once a coin is recognized, authenticated, and publicized, the window closes, the market hardens, prices explode, and the casual owner who spent it for a cup of coffee is left with nothing but regret. That's the fear side of this story, and it's real. But there's excitement too, because unlike stocks or real estate, this treasure hunt doesn't require permission. You don't need a broker. You don't need insider access. All you need is awareness. Somewhere in America right now, a 1969 penny is sitting in a drawer, a cigar box, or a forgotten jar. Someone owns it without knowing its potential. That possibility is intoxicating. Here's a moment of humor to reset the tension. Imagine telling your spouse that the reason you're staring at pennies with a magnifying glass is research. Sounds ridiculous, right? Until it isn't. until one small detail turns a joke into a life-altering phone call from an auction house. As demand for elite-grade modern rarities surged, the 1969 penny crossed an invisible line. It stopped being a coin and became an artifact. High-end collectors don't chase these for nostalgia, they chase them for legacy. Ownership isn't about spending power alone, it's about possessing something almost no one else can ever have. And when a coin reaches that level, price becomes secondary to access. That's how valuations climb into the millions. But here's the cliffhanger that keeps professionals awake at night. Not every valuable 1969 penny has been found. Not every example has been authenticated. Some are still hiding, misattributed, dismissed, or ignored. And every year that passes, the odds shrink a broken bar unless you're the one paying attention. Think about the psychology of selling. Most people wait too long. They assume tomorrow will be better, or that value will always rise. Smart sellers understand timing. When a coin like this surfaces, the first verified examples command the strongest premiums. The market rewards the prepared, not the hopeful. That's why awareness today matters more than excitement tomorrow. The transition from curiosity to action is where lives change. Someone finds an unusual 1969 penny. They hesitate. Fear creeps in. What if it's nothing? What if I look foolish? That hesitation has cost people millions. The professionals don't hesitate. They verify. They document. They protect themselves from regret. And here's the uncomfortable truth that rarely gets said out loud. Wealth often comes disguised as inconvenience. It asks you to slow down, to question assumptions, to look twice when everyone else looks away. The 1969 Lincoln Center rewards the person willing to do exactly that. As we near the end of this story, the tension tightens, because now you know enough to be dangerous. You know that pennies aren't always pennies. You know that 1969 isn't just a date, it's a fault line in modern numismatics. And you know that somewhere, someone is about to discover what they've been holding all along. The final question isn't whether these coins exist. They do. The final question is simpler, and more unsettling. When the penny that could change everything crosses your path, a broken bar, will you recognize it, or will you spend it? Because history doesn't announce itself with trumpets. Sometimes it whispers from the bottom of a drawer, waiting for the one person willing to listen, the kind that smells faintly of old paper and forgotten summers. And finding a single copper penny staring back at you, it looks ordinary, worn, almost humble. And yet, in this exact moment, that unassuming 1971 Lincoln 1-cent coin without a mint mark could be worth more than most homes in America, more than a lifetime of 9-to-5 paychecks, as much as $3.7 million. Sounds impossible, right? That doubt you're feeling is exactly why stories like this keep happening again and again, usually to someone else, until, suddenly, they don't. In the early 1970s, America was restless. The Vietnam War dragged on, inflation was creeping into everyday life, and copper prices were quietly becoming a problem for the U.S. Mint. In 1971, millions of Lincoln cents rolled off the presses in Philadelphia, which meant no mint mark at all. They were meant to be spendable, forgettable, and everywhere. Coffee change, gas station change, couch cushion change. No one saved them. No one imagined that one of these coins would someday rewrite a family's financial future. But history has a funny habit of hiding wealth in plain sight, and sometimes, the smallest mistakes create the largest fortunes. Somewhere during production, something went wrong. Or rather, something went extraordinarily right. A microscopic deviation in metal composition. A dye anomaly so subtle it escaped immediate detection. A perfect storm of timing, pressure, and human oversight. Most 1971 pennies are worth exactly 1 cent, but a tiny fraction exist that simply shouldn't, and those are the coins collectors lose sleep over. Here's where the story turns uncomfortable, because this is the part most people skip. They assume rarity means obvious damage or cartoonish errors, A hole through the middle, a giant crack, something that screams, "I'm valuable." The real monsters don't scream, they whisper, and if you're not listening closely, you'll spend them without a second thought. Or worse, you already did. Now pause for a second and be honest. Have you ever rolled pennies and dumped them at the bank just to get rid of the weight? Yeah, we all have. Collectors call that sound of coins pouring into a machine the sound of lost fortunes. Dramatic? Maybe. Accurate? Absolutely. What makes the legendary 1971 no-mint mark Lincoln cent different isn't just rarity, it's desire. Deep, competitive, almost obsessive desire. High-end collectors don't want just any rare coin, they want the one with a story, the one tied to a pivotal era, the one that proves they own something no one else can. And this penny checks every box. Picture a single cent that shouldn't exist in its known form, authenticated, graded, and locked inside a slab of clear plastic that suddenly transforms it from pocket change into a financial instrument. Auction rooms go quiet when it appears. Phone bidders lean forward, someone clears their throat, someone else realizes they've already lost, and then the numbers start climbing, fast. 300,000, 800,000, 1.5 million, still going. At this level, no one blinks, because when a specimen reaches the upper tier of condition and anomaly, price becomes secondary to ownership. And this is how a coin struck for 1 cent becomes valued at $3.7 million in the current market, not because of hype, but because supply is effectively zero and demand is relentless. And here's the uncomfortable cliffhanger: what if one more exists? Statistically, it's possible. In fact, it's likely. Coins don't disappear, they migrate into jars, into estate boxes, into old coffee cans in basements where no one has looked since Reagan was president. That's not a fantasy, that's documented reality. The fear collectors live with is not that these coins are gone, but that someone else will find one before they do. If you're wondering whether you'd recognize it, that's the trick. At first glance, it looks normal. Lincoln's profile, wheatless reverse, no mint mark under the date, nothing flashy. The magic is in the details: weight, color, strike sharpness, microscopic anomalies that only show themselves under proper inspection. This is why fortunes don't announce themselves. They require curiosity, and curiosity is expensive to ignore. Think about this. The people who discovered these ultra-rare coins weren't all experts. Some were retirees cleaning out garages, some were heirs sorting through a parent's belongings. One man famously found his during a casual conversation that started with, "You still have your dad's old coins?" That question alone changed his life. Not overnight, not like a lottery ticket, but permanently. There's a reason wealthy collectors don't laugh at pennies. They fear them. Because pennies have history, volume, and decades of unnoticed errors. A 1971 no-mint mark cent sits right in the danger zone where most people assume nothing valuable could possibly exist. That assumption has cost millions. Let me ask you something slightly uncomfortable. If someone offered you $3.7 million today for something currently sitting in your house, would you even know it? Or would you swear you don't own anything that valuable? That hesitation is exactly where opportunity hides. As the market tightens and elite collectors age, urgency increases. They're racing time. Museums are acquiring, private vaults are filling. Every authenticated example that disappears into long-term storage pushes the value of the remaining coins even higher. This isn't a bubble, it's a squeeze. And here's a moment of humor, because we need one. Imagine telling your younger self, the version of you who dropped pennies on the sidewalk because they weren't worth bending over for, that one of those coins could someday buy a beachfront house. Past you would laugh, present you might not. The final act of this story isn't about coins. It's about attention. About slowing down long enough to notice what others dismiss. About recognizing that wealth doesn't always arrive in designer packaging. Sometimes it shows up brown, scratched, and hiding under a layer of dust. If you own old pennies, especially from the early 1970s, the real risk isn't that they're worthless. The real risk is assuming they are, because once you let them go, the story ends. And someone else gets to tell it, somewhere right now. A 1971 no-mint mark Lincoln cent with the right characteristics is waiting to be recognized. It doesn't care who finds it. It doesn't care about your plans or your doubts. It only cares that eventually, someone will look closely enough. The question isn't whether these coins exist. We already know they do. The question is far more dangerous. What if the next $3.7 million penny is already yours? And this is the last time anyone ever reminds you to look. A single penny, dull brown, hiding in plain sight, sitting in a coffee can, a dresser drawer, or the bottom of a drawer you haven't opened in years. It looks ordinary, it feels ordinary, and that's exactly why most people never give it a second glance. But what if one of those pennies could quietly be worth more than a luxury home, more than a lifetime of average paychecks, more than $3 million? Not a gold coin, not a museum relic, a penny. Specifically, the 1977 Lincoln 1 cent with no mint mark. And before you laugh and say, "Come on, it's just a penny," stay with me, because that reaction alone has already cost some people fortunes. In the late 1970s, America was tired, inflation was biting, gas lines were long, confidence in the economy was shaky. The U.S. Mint was producing billions of pennies, churning them out so fast that perfection was never the priority, speed was. And in that environment, mistakes didn't just happen, they slipped through, unnoticed, uncelebrated, and eventually scattered across the country in everyday change. Most of those pennies were spent, lost, or ignored, but a microscopic handful were different, subtly different, dangerously different. The 1977 Lincoln cent without a mint mark was supposed to be ordinary, struck in Philadelphia. It carried no letter beneath the date, just like millions of others, but among those millions, a few rare examples emerged with astonishing characteristics, exceptional strike quality, unusual plankett properties, and near-mythical preservation. Coins that somehow survived untouched, uncirculated, and nearly flawless, when every force of daily life was trying to wear them down. And in the world of elite coin collecting, where condition is king and rarity is power, those differences can mean everything. Here's where things get uncomfortable, and maybe a little exciting, because the value isn't obvious. There's no big error screaming at you, no dramatic crack or missing design. The danger of the 1977 penny is how normal it looks. That's the fear part, the kind of fear that whispers, "What if I already had one and spent it?" Or worse, "What if I still have one and don't know it?" Think about how many pennies have passed through your hands since 1977, thousands, tens of thousands, and how many did you really inspect? Now imagine this, a man cleaning out his late father's belongings finds an old roll of pennies wrapped in faded paper. He almost throws it out. After all, it's face value, right? But something stops him, maybe curiosity, maybe guilt, maybe luck. He opens the roll. Inside are 1977 pennies, bright, sharp, untouched. One of them stands out to a trained eye. Months later, after expert grading, that single cent becomes one of the most talked about modern Lincoln pennies ever authenticated. Estimated market value, as high as $3.5 million. Suddenly, the dusty drawer looks very different. This is where excitement kicks in, because unlike ancient treasures buried underground, these coins didn't come from lost civilizations. They came from grocery stores, gas stations, pocket change. They could still be out there, and yes, the odds are slim, very slim, but they're not zero. And when the payoff is life-changing, even a small chance feels massive. Collectors don't pay millions because they're bored, they pay because of convergence, rarity, condition, historical context, and demand colliding at the same moment. The 1977 no-mint mark penny sits right at that intersection. Billions were made, but virtually none survived in perfect condition. Fewer still possess the unique qualities that push them into legendary status, and fewer than that are available at all. Most are locked away, never to be sold publicly again. Scarcity on top of scarcity. That's how million-dollar prices are born. Here's a pattern interrupt for you. Ready? If pennies are worthless, why do banks weigh them instead of counting them? Because even one oddball can matter. Funny how institutions understand variance, but people don't. We assume sameness. The market thrives on difference. As time moved on, interest in modern rarities exploded. Wealthy collectors began shifting away from ancient coins and toward pieces they could emotionally connect with. Coins from their lifetime. Coins they remember spending. Coins that feel personal. A 1977 penny isn't abstract. It's familiar, and that familiarity fuels competition. When two high-net-worth collectors want the same piece, logic leaves the room and price takes off. Now let's talk urgency, because this window doesn't stay open forever. Every year, more pennies are lost, damaged, or melted. Every year, the number of surviving top-grade examples shrinks. And every year, more people learn about these coins, which means fewer slip through unnoticed. The early birds already moved. The question is whether there's still one hiding in your world. You might be thinking, okay, but how would I even know? That's the cliffhanger most people never resolve. They assume they wouldn't recognize value if it existed. And that assumption is exactly what keeps rare coins undiscovered. Experts look for sharpness in Lincoln's portrait, full detail in the hair and beard, crisp lettering, and pristine surfaces free of wear. These aren't pennies that jingled around in pockets for decades. These are coins that somehow avoided life. And yes, they exist. There's also fear on the other side. Fear of getting it wrong. Fear of being laughed at. Fear of hoping for something big and being disappointed. That fear keeps people from checking, from asking, from learning. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The people who sell million-dollar coins didn't know at first either. They asked, they verified, they took the risk of curiosity. Picture yourself holding a penny up to the light. Just one, then another, then another. It feels silly, a broken bar, until it doesn't. Until the idea hits you that wealth doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers from the bottom of a jar. The story of the 1977 no-mint mark Lincoln cent is really a story about attention. About slowing down in a world that rushes past value every day. About understanding that extraordinary outcomes often come from ordinary objects. And about realizing that selling a rare coin isn't just about money. It's about leverage, freedom, options, the ability to choose a different life path because you noticed what others ignored. And here is the final cliffhanger, the one that lingers after the screen goes dark. Somewhere in America right now, there is almost certainly a penny sitting unnoticed that would change someone's life forever if they recognized it. The odds say it's rare. History says it happens anyway. The only real question left is simple, and maybe a little unsettling. When was the last time you actually looked at your pennies? Most people will never notice a penny. It sits quietly in a cup holder, sinks into couch cushions, or disappears into drawers that never get opened. But every once in a while, history hides inside the smallest places. Tonight, that history begins with a single copper-colored coin dated 1981, no mint mark, a penny so ordinary-looking that millions of Americans have already spent it without a second thought. And yet, one verified specimen of this exact coin has been linked to a valuation of $3.2 million, not 3,000, not 300,000, 3.2 million. And the uncomfortable question is this: what if the most valuable object you've ever owned already passed through your hands? The story starts quietly, as all dangerous stories do. In 1981, the United States was changing. Inflation was high, the Cold War still cast its shadow, and the U.S. Mint was experimenting behind closed doors. Most Americans never knew it, but that year marked the final full chapter of the classic copper penny before composition changes took hold. What left Philadelphia without a mint mark was supposed to be routine. Billions of coins, mass-produced, identical, forgettable, except not all of them were. Imagine a production floor running day and night, machines vibrating, dies striking faster than human eyes could track. In moments like that, mistakes don't announce themselves, they whisper. A die prepared differently than intended, a plan kit that doesn't belong, a strike that never should have existed. And sometimes, when those whispers slip past quality control, history escapes into circulation. Now here's where the mood changes, because the 1981 no-mint mark Lincoln cent is not valuable simply because of its date. Most are worth 1 cent, maybe 2 on a generous day. The coin that changed everything was different, subtly, dangerously. Its metal composition did not match official records. Its strike characteristics raised questions that took years to answer, and when it finally surfaced in collector circles, experts didn't laugh, they went quiet. Silence is the loudest sound in a coin room. Independent metallurgical testing revealed anomalies that should not exist in a normal circulation strike. Weight inconsistencies, die characteristics linked to experimental tooling, and most critically, evidence that this coin may have been struck on a transitional or test plan kit never authorized for public release. In plain English, it wasn't supposed to exist. And in the world of American coinage, that's where the real money lives. Think about this for a second. The most valuable coins are not the oldest, they're not always gold. They are the mistakes that escaped destruction, the survivors, the rebels, the ones that slipped through while everyone else was busy doing their job. If coins could talk, this one would whisper, "I wasn't meant to survive." At first, the owner didn't believe it either. Just another penny pulled from an old family jar, saved out of habit rather than hope. It sat ignored for years, passed over, almost spent. The kind of near miss that makes your stomach tighten later. When it was finally examined, the reaction was disbelief, then skepticism, then urgency. Because once a coin like this is identified, time becomes your enemy. Markets move, stories leak, opportunities vanish. Here's the part nobody tells you. The moment you realize you might be holding something extraordinary, fear arrives first. Fear of being wrong. Fear of being laughed at, fear of getting scammed, fear of discovering too late that you already spent it on a cup of coffee 10 years ago. That fear keeps most people silent, and silence is why fortunes remain hidden. Collectors who understand this space know something the public doesn't. Modern rarities are the most dangerous opportunities in numismatics. Everyone expects value in ancient gold. Nobody expects it in a brown penny dated 1981. That disbelief is what keeps prices low until they explode. Now let me ask you something uncomfortable. How many pennies do you own right now? Not how many you remember. How many are sitting in drawers, boxes, old coffee cans, inherited collections you never opened because they looked boring? If your answer isn't 0, your odds just changed. The verified 1981 no-mint mark penny that reached a reported valuation of $3.2 million did not sell because it was shiny. It sold because it was proven. Proven rare, proven anomalous, proven impossible under standard mint procedures. Wealth doesn't chase beauty, it chases certainty. And yet, even now, most people watching this are thinking, "That won't be me." That sentence has quietly destroyed more wealth than any recession. Because history doesn't select special people, it selects prepared ones. There's a strange irony here. The Lincoln penny was designed to honor honest work, humble beginnings, and quiet perseverance. And here we are, discovering that the smallest, most ignored coin can carry life-altering value. If that isn't poetic, nothing is. Let's reset your attention for a second. Imagine explaining to your younger self that one day, a penny could buy a house, pay off every debt you have, and still leave enough to change your lifestyle forever. Your younger self would laugh, and then probably throw the penny away. Funny how perspective works when money is involved. But back to the coin. What makes the story even more unsettling is that experts believe more than one example may exist. Not many. Possibly only a handful, but not zero. And that means the window isn't closed. It's narrowing. Markets thrive on discovery. The moment multiple confirmed examples surface, the narrative shifts from miracle to category, and categories attract capital. Investors who never cared about pennies suddenly want exposure. Prices don't rise slowly then, they jump hard. This is where urgency matters. Coins like this don't announce themselves with fireworks. They sit quietly until someone knowledgeable looks closely enough, and once the story breaks wide, the opportunity for ordinary owners disappears. There's a cliffhanger here that should keep you awake. The U.S. Mint has never fully disclosed every experimental run from the late 1970s and early 1980s. Records exist, but not all of them are public, which means some of the most valuable American coins ever created may still be hiding in plain sight, unrecognized, ungraded, unloved. Ask yourself this: if one 1981 no-mint mark penny reached a valuation of $3.2 million, what happens to the next one? Does it sell quietly? Does it trigger a bidding war? Or does it rewrite the price ceiling entirely? This is how wealth changes hands without warning. And here is the final twist: the people who profit from these discoveries are rarely professional collectors. They're regular Americans who took the time to look twice, who asked questions, who didn't assume small meant worthless. So before this story ends, do one thing differently than you did yesterday. Don't rush past the ordinary. Don't dismiss what feels boring. Don't assume value always announces itself loudly. Sometimes, it waits patiently, stamped into copper, dated 1981, hoping the right set of eyes finally notices, because somewhere, right now, a penny is sitting in silence, worth more than most people will earn in a lifetime, and the only thing separating it from obscurity is attention. The real question isn't whether coins like this exist anymore. They do. The question is whether you'll recognize one before someone else does. Somewhere in your house, right now, there may be a single brown penny quietly sitting in a jar, a drawer, or an old coffee can in the garage. It looks ordinary, forgettable, the kind of coin you'd walk past without a second thought. And yet, if that penny happens to be the right 1987 Lincoln 1 cent with no mint mark, it could represent a value whispered about in auction rooms and collector circles at nearly $3 million. Not 3,000, not 300,000, 3 million. Let that number settle in for a moment. Then ask yourself a dangerous question: what if you already own it? Most people believe the story of American wealth is written in stocks, real estate, or businesses passed down through generations. Almost no one imagines it could begin with a penny. That belief is exactly why extraordinary coins slip through ordinary hands every single day. The 1987 Lincoln cent is one of the most misunderstood coins in modern American history, dismissed as too recent to matter, too common to be special. And yet, hidden within this year is a razor-thin category of coins that rewrote the rules of modern coin collecting and shattered assumptions about where real money can hide. In 1987, the United States Mint was in a period of transition. Behind the scenes, subtle changes in dies, striking pressure, and plankette composition were happening quietly, with no announcement to the public. To the average American, a penny was still just a penny, but to a handful of specialists, something wasn't quite right. Certain 1987 no-mint mark Lincoln cents struck at the Philadelphia Mint began appearing with characteristics that should not have existed together. The kind of characteristics that make seasoned collectors lean closer, adjust their glasses, and stop breathing for a second. Here's where the story turns uncomfortable, because most of these coins never made it into collections. They were spent, dropped into tip jars, given as change at gas stations, lost in couch cushions. And that's the first cliffhanger of this story. If nearly all of them vanished into everyday circulation, where are the survivors now? To understand why this penny matters, you have to understand the psychology of rarity. True rarity isn't always about how many coins were made. It's about how many were noticed. In 1987, Billions of pennies were struck, but only a microscopic number were struck with the exact combination of die anomalies, metal flow irregularities, and strike characteristics that define the ultra-elite examples. These are not errors you can spot from across the room. They are the kind of details that hide in plain sight, invisible until the right light hits the surface at the right angle. Imagine holding one in your hand. Lincoln's portrait appears normal at first glance. Then you notice the texture of the fields looks unusually sharp. The devices feel almost sculpted. The date sits with a presence that seems heavier than it should be. Is that a doubled impression? Is the rim slightly off-center, or is your brain just playing tricks on you? This moment of doubt is where fortunes are made or lost, because most people talk themselves out of possibility. They assume it can't be real. They assume lightning doesn't strike twice. They put the penny back. Collectors didn't. They sent these coins to professional grading services. And when the results came back, the market reacted with disbelief. A modern penny, authenticated, certified, and recognized as a once-in-a-generation anomaly. Suddenly, auction estimates jumped from thousands to six figures, then from six figures into territory most people never associate with copper coins. When one of the finest known examples crossed the block in a private transaction rumored at nearly $3 million, the conversation changed forever. Now let me interrupt this for a second with a reality check. If you're thinking, that's nice, but there's no way I'd ever have one, congratulations, you're thinking exactly like the people who already spent them. Humor me for 10 seconds. When was the last time you actually looked at your pennies instead of ignoring them? Exactly. The second act of this story is about fear and urgency, because time is not neutral in the coin world. Every year, more coins are damaged, cleaned, or lost. And cleaning, by the way, is the fastest way to destroy value. A $3 million penny wiped with a cloth becomes a curiosity worth face value. Yes, really, that's not drama, that's the market. Which means the clock is ticking, whether you're aware of it or not. There is also a quiet race happening right now. Professional coin hunters, estate buyers, and liquidation specialists actively search through old collections, inherited jars, and forgotten hoards. They know what to look for. They know how rare true high-grade 1987 no-mint mark specimens are, and they know the supply is effectively frozen. No more are being made. The only way one enters the market is if someone like you decides to look. And here's another uncomfortable truth. The biggest finds don't come from experts. They come from people who didn't know what they had until they asked the right question. A widow sorting through her husband's desk, a son cleaning out a parent's garage, a homeowner rolling coins before a move. These are the moments where life quietly intersects with legacy. At this point, some viewers start to feel excitement. Others feel fear. Fear that they missed their chance. Fear that they already spent something priceless. Both emotions are valid, but here's the twist. The story isn't over, because not every valuable 1987 penny has been discovered, not even close. The third act is where opportunity either becomes action or fades into regret. If you ever come across a 1987 Lincoln cent with no mint mark, the next decision matters more than the coin itself. Do you dismiss it, or do you respect the possibility? The difference between the two is measured in commas. Professional authentication is not optional at this level. The market does not reward guesses, it rewards proof. And once proof exists, everything changes. Coins that sat unnoticed for decades suddenly become centerpieces of negotiation. Buyers emerge, offers escalate, and for some owners, life pivots in a way they never planned. Imagine the phone call. Imagine hearing that the penny you found isn't just rare, but exceptional. Imagine realizing that a single cent could eliminate debt, fund retirement, or redefine your family's future. Now imagine hanging up and realizing how close you came to never knowing. Let me leave you with one final question, and it's not rhetorical. If the difference between your current reality and a dramatically different future weighed 1 gram and fit on your fingertip, would you at least take the time to look? Because history has a strange habit of hiding its greatest rewards in the smallest places, and sometimes, the wealthiest stories in America don't begin with $1, they begin with a penny.
Somewhere in America right now, inside a dusty coffee can, an old sack drawer, or a forgotten jar on a garage shelf, a single copper coin may be quietly sitting there, blending in, looking ordinary, waiting for someone to finally notice it. It doesn't shine, it doesn't scream for attention, and yet, if it's the right one, it carries a story so powerful that it has shocked seasoned collectors, rewritten family futures, and sold for as much as $4.2 million. This is not a myth, not a rumor passed around online. This is the story of the 1973 Lincoln 1-cent penny with no mint mark, a coin most people have held without a second thought, and a coin that has turned pocket change into generational wealth. Imagine the year 1973, gas prices were climbing, America was adjusting to changing economy, and the Lincoln penny was still considered the most common coin in circulation. Billions were struck, passed from hand to hand, dropped onto vending machines, tipped onto countertops. Nobody stopped to admire them, nobody thought they were special, and that's exactly why the most valuable examples slipped through unnoticed. While the nation focused on bigger things, a small number of 1973 pennies left the Philadelphia Mint carrying something invisible to the naked eye, something that would later separate a 1-cent coin from a multi-million-dollar artifact. Now here's where the story takes a turn. Because the Philadelphia Mint, unlike Denver or San Francisco, did not use a mint mark in 1973, that alone is normal. But what happened during production was anything but normal. Experimental plan case, metal composition irregularities, and striking anomalies quietly entered circulation. A handful of 1973 no-mint mark pennies were struck under conditions that created coins unlike the rest: wrong metal compositions, transitional errors, precision anomalies so rare that only a microscopic examination would reveal their true identity. At the time, they were spent on groceries, on gas, on coffee. No alarms, no headlines, just silence. Fast forward decades later, and a collector notices something strange. The color looks off, the weight doesn't match, the ring when dropped on a table sounds wrong. That moment of curiosity, that single pause before dismissing the coin, becomes the turning point. Because once authenticated, once verified by top grading services, a specific class of 1973 no-mint mark Lincoln cents entered elite territory. Auction rooms went quiet, bidding paddles went up, phone lines lit up, and when the hammer finally dropped, the price stunned everyone watching. $4.2 million for a penny. Let that sink in for a second. $4.2 million for something most people wouldn't bend down to pick up off the sidewalk. If that doesn't make you slightly nervous about what might be sitting in your own home, it should, because fear is part of this story. The fear of having already spent something priceless, the fear of overlooking history, the fear that the coin you casually gave away years ago could have changed everything. But excitement follows close behind, because unlike ancient artifacts locked behind museum glass, these coins were released into everyday life. They are still out there, in collections, in jars, in inherited boxes from parents and grandparents who lived through the 70s and saved everything. And every time another collection is examined, the same question hangs in the air like electricity. Is this one of them? Here's the part most people get wrong. They think value comes from age alone. They assume old automatically means valuable. But the 1973 no-mint mark penny proves something deeper. Value comes from rarity layered on top of circumstance, from a perfect storm of production errors, historical timing, and survival. Millions were made. Almost all are worth 1 cent. But a microscopic fraction exists outside the rules, and those are the coins that rewrite lives. Picture a retiree, finally deciding to sort through decades of saved change, not looking for millions, just clearing space. One coin feels heavier, another looks slightly silvery instead of copper. A joke crosses their mind. What if this thing pays for my retirement? They laugh, because it sounds ridiculous, until it isn't, until a scale confirms the weight, until a magnet test raises eyebrows, until a professional grader seals it in plastic and calls it one of the finest known examples. Humor turns into disbelief. Disbelief turns into silence. Silence turns into tears. This is where urgency comes in, because markets don't wait forever. As more coins are discovered, as populations become known, as collectors lock them away in private vaults, opportunities narrow. The difference between checking your coins today and waiting another 10 years could be the difference between selling into a feeding frenzy or watching prices stabilize beyond reach. Wealth favors the prepared, not the lucky. And yet, the story isn't over. There's a cliffhanger built right into this coin, because experts believe not all examples have been found. Statistical models suggest gaps, missing specimens, coins that should exist based on production anomalies, but haven't surfaced yet. That means the next record-breaking 1973 no-mint mark penny could still be sitting unnoticed, maybe a few feet away from you right now, under a couch cushion, in a piggy bank, in a box labeled miscellaneous. Ask yourself an uncomfortable question. If you own something worth millions and didn't know it, would you want to keep not knowing, or would you want certainty? Because certainty is power. Certainty turns fear into confidence and curiosity into action. There's also a psychological twist here that collectors understand deeply. Once a coin crosses a certain value threshold, it stops being just a collectible. It becomes a status symbol, a financial instrument, a story people want to own. $1 million pennies don't just sell, they attract headlines, documentaries, and competitive bidding wars fueled by ego as much as investment logic. And every time one sells, it validates the next one, pushing the ceiling higher. Think about that the next time someone jokes about pennies being worthless. Smile, because the joke is on anyone who assumes value is always obvious. History loves hiding its treasures in plain sight. The Lincoln portrait on the 1973 penny hasn't changed much over the years. Honest, familiar, almost boring. And that's part of the genius of this story. The most extraordinary outcomes often wear the most ordinary faces. Wealth doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers. As this story moves toward its final turn, the question becomes personal, not theoretical. Personal. What do you have at home right now that you've never really examined? What did your parents save that you dismissed as junk? What would change in your life if a single cent turned into financial freedom? A paid-off house, a legacy for your children, the ability to choose how you spend the rest of your time. The 1973 no-mint mark Lincoln penny isn't just a coin, it's a reminder that opportunity doesn't always come wrapped in gold. Sometimes it's copper, sometimes it's small, sometimes it's been sitting quietly, waiting decades for the right moment and the right person. And here's the final cliffhanger, the one that keeps collectors awake at night. Every major discovery so far started the same way. Someone almost didn't check, someone almost spent it, someone almost gave it away. Almost is the most expensive word in collecting. So before you assume this story belongs to someone else, before you tell yourself lightning doesn't strike twice, remember this: the last $4.2 million penny was once just another coin in someone's hand, until it wasn't. You're holding a penny, not a gold bar, not a stock certificate, a single copper-colored coin that once bought a stick of gum. It's scratched, it's dull, it's been ignored for decades, and yet, somewhere in the United States, a coin just like it has been whispered about in private collector circles with a number attached that makes people laugh. First a broken bar and then go silent. $4 million for a 1976 mint mark Lincoln 1 cent. And the most unsettling part isn't the price, it's the possibility that the next one could already be sitting in a drawer, a jar, or a forgotten envelope inside your home. Most people hear a claim like that and immediately dismiss it. A penny worth millions? Come on! That reaction is exactly why these coins keep slipping through fingers unnoticed. History doesn't announce itself loudly, it hides in plain sight. And the 1976 Lincoln cent was born in a year when Americans were distracted by fireworks, parades, and the noise of a bicentennial celebration. While the nation looked up, the Denver Mint quietly struck millions of pennies, each one meant to be ordinary, forgettable, disposable. But every now and then, something goes wrong in a way that changes everything. Think about how many hands a penny passes through. Cash registers, coffee counters, car cup holders, children's piggy banks. It lives a rough life. That's what makes survival so rare. And rarity is where value begins to grow teeth. The Lincoln cent itself is already one of the most collected coins in American history, not because it's flashy, but because it's familiar. Abraham Lincoln's face has stared back at generations of Americans through war, prosperity, inflation, and change. By 1976, that image was already iconic. The Denver Mint mark, a small letter tucked quietly under the date, was never meant to carry power. But power doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like a tiny letter no one bothers to check. Now here's where the story tightens. In the mid-1970s, the U.S. Mint was under pressure. Rising copper prices, massive demand, aging equipment, and human fatigue all collided at once. When systems are strained, mistakes are born. Plan Ks get mixed, dies wear down past safe limits, alignment drifts, and once in a while, a coin slips through that doesn't just have a minor flaw, but a perfect storm of anomalies so extreme that it becomes one of a kind. That's not romance, that's manufacturing reality. Collectors don't pay millions for nostalgia, they pay for impossibility, they pay for what cannot be repeated. Somewhere along the line, a 1976 penny emerged with characteristics so unusual that experts reportedly froze when they saw it. Weight that didn't match expectations, metal composition that raised eyebrows, strike details that shouldn't exist together on the same coin, the kind of piece that forces professionals to stop talking and start measuring. And once a coin crosses that threshold, it's no longer a penny, it becomes an artifact. Here's a question that should make you uncomfortable. How many pennies have you never actually looked at, not glanced at, not assumed were common, but truly examined? If you're like most people, the answer is almost all of them. That's the fear side of the story. The fear that value doesn't vanish a broken bar, it gets spent. It gets tossed into parking meters and donation jars. It disappears because no one bothered to ask a simple question. What if this one is different? The market doesn't reward effort, it rewards awareness. One word of a potential multi-million-dollar 1976 cent began circulating among advanced collectors. The reaction wasn't excitement, it was urgency. Phones lit up, old rolls were reopened, estates were re-examined. Because once a coin like that is authenticated and privately traded, the clock starts ticking. The next discovery doesn't get the benefit of disbelief, it gets competition. Imagine the moment someone realizes what they have. 1 second you're holding a penny, the next, you're holding leverage. Financial freedom doesn't always arrive as a promotion or an inheritance. Sometimes it arrives disguised as clutter. The kind of clutter people tell you to clean out on a weekend. There's a strange humor in that, isn't there? We chase wealth our entire lives, and occasionally it hides in the couch cushions, laughing quietly. But let's talk about reality, because fantasy doesn't sell coins. Condition matters, survival matters, authentication matters. A coin rumored to be worth $4 million doesn't get that number because it's shiny. It gets there because it survives scrutiny. Professional grading, metallurgical testing, provenance. The process is brutal, and that's why the reward is so extreme. Most coins fail long before the finish line, but the ones that pass change lives. This is where excitement turns into strategy. The smartest collectors aren't gamblers, they're patient observers. They understand that even if only one confirmed 1976 penny commands a headline-grabbing valuation, the search itself reshapes the market. Interest rises, prices across the category tighten, buyers appear who weren't there before, and suddenly, coins that once sold for pocket change start commanding serious money simply because people are paying attention. Ask yourself another uncomfortable question. If you did find something extraordinary, would you even know what to do next? Panic is expensive, so is ignorance. The difference between a five-figure sale and a life-changing one often comes down to who you talk to first. The wrong buyer smells desperation, the right one smells opportunity. And in high-end numismatics, silence is often worth more than speed. There's a moment in every great discovery story where disbelief gives way to clarity, where someone stops laughing at the idea of a valuable penny and starts protecting it like a passport. That's the turning point. That's where Act 2 quietly becomes Act 3. Because once the reality sets in, there's no going back to ignorance. Every coin becomes a question mark. Every old rule becomes a possibility. And here's the cliffhanger most people don't like to hear. If a coin like this exists once, it can exist again. Not in huge numbers, not predictably, but enough to keep serious money watching closely. Enough to make the next unopened box of cents feel heavier than it should. Enough to turn ordinary people into careful examiners overnight. We live in a time when wealth stories feel distant, digital, and abstract. Stocks on screens, numbers in apps. The idea that something solid, something physical, something you can hold, might still unlock that level of wealth feels almost rebellious. Yet American history keeps proving the same point over and over again. The biggest surprises rarely announce themselves, they wait to be noticed. So before you dismiss that jar of pennies, before you roll them up and trade them for convenience, pause, look closer, ask better questions. Because somewhere out there, someone already asked the right one and discovered that the single 1976 Lincoln cent could rewrite an entire future. And the most dangerous thought of all is this: what if the next one isn't already gone? What if it hasn't been spent, melted, or overlooked yet? What if it's still waiting a broken bar exactly where you least expect it?
You're standing in your kitchen, coffee getting cold, bills stacked on the counter, and somewhere nearby, maybe in a dusty jar, maybe in a forgotten drawer, is a single brown penny you've ignored your entire life. Not gold, not silver, just 1 cent. And yet, in the right condition, with the right story behind it, that unassuming 1990 Lincoln 1 cent with no mint mark has been connected to values whispered in the millions. Yes, millions. Pause right there, because if your instinct is to laugh and say, "Come on, it's just a penny," that reaction alone might be the most expensive mistake you ever make. The year is 1990, the Cold War is ending, the Berlin Wall has fallen, and America is quietly producing billions of pennies. No fanfare, no headlines, just copper-coated zinc coins rolling off presses in Philadelphia, so ordinary that they didn't even bother stamping a mint mark on them. And that's exactly why they were ignored. Ordinary things are always ignored, a broken bar until they aren't. Somewhere in that sea of sameness, a handful of 1990 no mint mark Lincoln cents emerged with characteristics so rare, so perfectly aligned, that they rewrote what collectors believed was possible for a modern penny. This is where the story turns, and where you lean in just a little closer. Most people think valuable coins are ancient, worn smooth by centuries of history, Roman emperors, gold doubloons. But modern American coinage has its own secrets, and the 1990 Lincoln cent is one of the most misunderstood. On the surface, it looks familiar. Abraham Lincoln's comp profile, the date tucked neatly beneath his shoulder, the words "In God We Trust" floating above. Flip it over and there's the Lincoln Memorial, clean and symmetrical. Nothing screams rare, nothing begs for attention, which makes it dangerous, because the most valuable coins often hide in plain sight. Now here's where fear creeps in, just a little, because millions of these pennies pass through American hands. Grocery stores, gas stations, vending machines, kids' piggy banks, and most were spent without a second thought. But a microscopic fraction is so small it's almost uncomfortable to think about. Left the mint with anomalies so precise that advanced collectors stopped calling them mistakes. They started calling them miracles. Die varieties, strike characteristics, transitional metal behaviors, and preservation states that almost never survive circulation. And when one of these coins surfaced in elite condition, certified and verified, the market reacted the way it always does when rarity meets desire. Prices didn't climb, they exploded. Let me ask you something, and answer honestly. When was the last time you actually looked at a penny? Not just glanced at it, but really looked, tilted it under light, checked the edges, examined the surfaces? If the answer is never, you're not alone. That's the joke of it. Really, we obsess over dollars while stepping on pennies. Humor me for a second. What if the wealth you're chasing has already passed through your hands? What if you literally paid for a cup of coffee with something that could have paid for the cafe tilde copyright? As the 1990s rolled on, collectors began noticing something odd. Certain 1990 no-mint mark cents displayed striking differences in strike sharpness, planchet quality, and die alignment. Most were subtle, almost insulting in their subtlety, the kind of detail only someone obsessed would notice. And obsession, in the world of rare coins, is where fortunes are born. When one extraordinary example surfaced, a pristine, blazing with original luster, and bearing a combination of characteristics never officially documented, the bidding didn't start cautiously, it started aggressively, because the people in that room understood something the rest of the world didn't yet. This wasn't just a penny, it was a survivor. Here's the cliffhanger that changed everything. The coin wasn't just rare, it was alone. No known equals, no confirmed duplicates in the same condition. Think about that. In a year when billions of pennies were made, only one example rose to the top of the population reports. That's when the conversation shifted from valuable to historic. And historic coins don't obey normal price rules, they create their own gravity. Now the excitement kicks in, because this is the moment everyone dreams about, when a certified 1990 no-mint mark Lincoln Cent, linked to elite grade preservation and exceptional mint characteristics, crossed the auction block. The number stunned even seasoned professionals. Phones came out, whispers circled, and then the hammer fell at a figure tied to an estimated market valuation of $3.7 million. Let that sink in. $3.7 million, for 1 cent. Somewhere, someone probably dropped their coffee. Somewhere else, someone suddenly remembered a drawer of pennies at home. Before you assume this is fantasy, remember how markets work. Rarity plus demand equals value. Add a compelling story, ironclad certification, and the psychological power of owning the best known, and logic steps aside. Collectors aren't just buying metal, they're buying bragging rights, legacy, security, the right to say, this is the one. And in an uncertain world, tangible assets with documented scarcity become magnets for serious money. But here's the uncomfortable part, and this is where urgency creeps in. Coins like this don't announce themselves, they don't glow, they don't whisper, I'm worth millions. They wait for someone curious enough, patient enough, and informed enough to notice them. And every year that passes, more pennies are damaged, cleaned, scratched, or lost. The window narrows, the odds tighten. And the difference between life-changing wealth and another missed opportunity often comes down to knowledge. Let's reset your attention for a second with a simple thought. If someone offered you a lottery ticket with odds this strange, billions printed, one winner, you'd probably laugh and walk away. Yet here's the twist. Unlike a lottery ticket, this penny already exists. It's already been printed, and it may already be in your possession. That's not luck, that's awareness. As we move deeper into this story, the tension sharpens, because the market for rare pennies isn't slowing down. It's accelerating. Younger collectors are entering, investors are diversifying, and top-tier Lincoln cents are being locked away in private collections, sometimes never to be seen again. When supply disappears and demand grows, prices don't ask permission, they leap. The 3.7 million figure isn't just a headline, it's a signal, a warning flare telling the world that modern cents are no longer modern, they're history. Imagine explaining this to someone who tossed a handful of pennies into a donation drawer last week. Imagine the look on their face. There's humor in that, sure, but also a quiet tragedy, because ignorance is expensive, and knowledge, in this space, is profitable. Here's another cliffhanger to hold on to. Experts believe there may be undiscovered examples still out there, not many, maybe only a few, maybe only one, sitting unnoticed because it looks boring, because it's brown, because it's small, and because nobody ever taught its owner what to look for. That possibility alone is enough to keep serious collectors awake at night. So where does that leave you? Right here, at the crossroads between curiosity and action, between dismissing this as a wild story and picking up a magnifying glass, between scrolling past and taking a closer look at your own coins. The 1990 no-mint mark Lincoln cent has already proven what's possible. It has shattered expectations, rewritten price guides, and turned pocket change into a symbol of modern American wealth. And as this story draws toward its final turn, remember this: every legendary coin began its life as something ordinary, passed hand to hand, overlooked, underestimated, until one day, someone paid attention. The question that lingers, the one that should make your pulse tick just a bit faster, is simple. When that next extraordinary penny reveals itself a broken bar, will it belong to someone else, or has it been waiting for you all along, almost invisible? And yet, under the right conditions, that exact kind of penny has been valued as high as $3.3 million. No mint mark, dated 1995, a Lincoln 1-cent coin most people would hand over without a second thought. And here's the uncomfortable question that should already be sitting in the back of your mind: what if you've already touched a broken bar and never realized it? Most people believe the story of valuable pennies ended with wheat cents and copper relics from the early 1900s. They think modern coins are mass-produced, boring, and worthless. That belief is precisely why fortunes slip quietly through fingers every single year, because wealth rarely announces itself with fireworks. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, disguised as spare change. The year 1995 was unremarkable to most Americans. The economy was stable, gas was cheap, life moved forward, but inside U.S. mint facilities, something subtle and extraordinary happened. Millions of pennies were struck, yes, but a tiny number were not struck the way they were supposed to be. And in the world of elite coin collectors, those mistakes are not flaws, they are gold. The 1995 Lincoln 1-cent without a mint mark was struck in Philadelphia, a mint that traditionally omits mint marks on cents. That alone doesn't make it rare. What makes it legendary is what happened during the striking process. Certain 1995 pennies were produced using die varieties and error conditions so extreme that they crossed from curiosity into historical anomaly. Coins that should never have existed, yet did. Coins that slipped through quality control, entered circulation, and vanished into everyday life. Imagine the irony: a coin worth millions today may have once paid for a newspaper, tipped a cashier, or rattled around in a child's pocket. There's something almost humorous about that, isn't there? A multi-million-dollar asset buying a stick of gum. Lincoln himself might raise an eyebrow. Now here's where the story turned serious. In the mid to late 2000s, advanced collectors began noticing something strange. Certain 1995 no-mint mark pennies showed doubling so sharp it looked like the coin was vibrating. Not machine doubling, not damage, true doubled die errors created during the hubbing process. The inscriptions showed separation, The date looked thicker. Lincoln's profile appeared almost ghosted. To the untrained eye, it still looked like a penny. To an expert, it looked like a once-in-a-generation discovery. As word quietly spread through auction houses and private collector circles, prices began to climb, first thousands, then tens of thousands, then six figures. By the time one pristine specimen, graded at the absolute highest levels, crossed the auction block, the room went silent. Bidding escalated fast, aggressively. When the final hammer fell, the number stunned even seasoned professionals. $3.3 million, for a penny. At that moment, the 1995 no-mint mark Lincoln cent was no longer pocket change. It was history, and this is where fear enters the room. Because the uncomfortable truth is that many of these coins are still out there. Not all have been found. Not all have been graded. Not all have been recognized for what they are. Some are sitting raw, unprotected, slowly wearing down as time passes. Every day that goes by, another potential fortune loses microscopic details that could mean the difference between life-changing money and just another old penny. Ask yourself this honestly: when was the last time you really looked at a penny? Most people don't. They dump them in jars. They leave them in cup holders. Some even throw them away. That casual neglect is exactly what keeps the door open for opportunity. Because while the average person ignores cents, serious buyers are hunting relentlessly. They are watching estates, flea markets, inherited collections, and online listings, hoping to catch what others miss. Now let's reset your attention for a second with a simple thought. If someone handed you a lottery ticket and said, "There's a 1 in a million chance this is worth millions," would you throw it away without checking? Of course not. Yet people do exactly that with pennies every day. The power of the 1995 no-mint mark penny isn't just in its price tag. It's in what it represents. Proof that wealth can exist where no one expects it. Proof that knowledge creates leverage. Proof that the difference between struggling and thriving can be as small as a single detail on a coin you already own. Collectors value this penny not just for rarity, but for condition, sharp strikes, original luster, no cleaning, no damage. The better the preservation, the higher the stakes. That's why two coins with the same date can live in entirely different financial universes. One buys coffee, the other buys freedom. And here comes the cliffhanger that most people never consider. What if the penny you own isn't the famous double die everyone talks about, a broken bar, but an even rarer transitional or heir variety that hasn't been fully documented yet? New discoveries still happen. The numismatic world evolves. Records are broken. New champions emerge. Today's overlooked coin can become tomorrow's headline. There's a reason wealthy collectors move quietly. They understand timing. They understand scarcity, and they understand that once the general public catches on, the window narrows fast, prices spike, competition increases, and sellers who waited too long often say the same thing: "I wish I had known sooner." This is the excitement part, because knowledge puts you ahead of the curve. Once you understand what makes the 1995 no-mint mark Lincoln cent special, you stop seeing pennies as clutter. You start seeing them as assets. Each coin becomes a question mark. Each handful of change becomes a possibility. And let's be honest for a moment. Wouldn't it feel incredible to discover that something you already owned could rewrite your financial story? No overnight schemes, no risky investments, just awareness, just timing, just knowing what to look for. As the market stands today, elite examples of the rare 1995 no-mint mark heir penny command staggering attention. Private offers, sealed auctions, international buyers, and the ceiling hasn't necessarily been reached. When scarcity meets demand, prices don't ask for permission, they move. So the next time you hear a penny drop, don't dismiss the sound, listen to it. Because that small metallic click might be the sound of opportunity tapping you on the shoulder, asking a very simple question: are you paying attention now? Because once you see the value hiding in plain sight, you never look at loose change the same way again. In your pocket, in a dusty jar, or buried inside an old coffee can that hasn't been opened in decades. There may be a single copper coin quietly waiting to change everything. Not tomorrow, not someday, but the moment you recognize what you're holding. The 1997 D. Lincoln 1-cent penny looks ordinary at first glance. Abraham Lincoln's familiar profile, a year most people remember as unremarkable. A penny people ignore, toss aside, or spend without a second thought. And that is exactly why this story matters. Because history has a strange habit of hiding life-changing wealth inside the most unassuming places. Picture this for a second. You're cleaning out a drawer. Maybe after dinner, maybe on a quiet Sunday afternoon, you spill out a handful of coins and think nothing of it. Pennies are the lowest form of money in modern America, right? Practically worthless. But what if one of those pennies wasn't worth 1 cent, or even $100, but millions? What if a single overlooked detail, a microscopic flaw struck into copper by accident, turned that penny into a 7-figure asset? And here's the uncomfortable question most people don't want to ask themselves. What if you already had a broken bar and let it go? The year is 1997. The Denver Mint is producing billions of Lincoln cents at high speed, day and night. Machines are humming, presses are striking, and quality control is focused on efficiency, not perfection. In moments like these, mistakes slip through. Not obvious mistakes, not cartoonish errors, but subtle, technical anomalies that only reveal themselves to trained eyes decades later. These are the kinds of errors that transform common coins into legendary ones. And the 1997 D penny sits right at the intersection of mass production and hidden imperfection. Most people assume rare coins are ancient, centuries old, or made of gold. That assumption is dangerous, because it blinds people to modern rarities hiding in plain sight. The 1997 D penny was produced in staggering numbers, yes, but rarity in numismatics isn't about how many were made. It's about how many survived in a specific, extraordinary form. A small subset of these pennies exhibits characteristics so unusual, so precisely defined, that collectors compete aggressively to own them. And when collectors compete, prices don't climb politely, they explode. Now imagine this, a penny that appears normal until it's examined under magnification. The lettering may show doubling so sharp it looks like the coin is vibrating. Lincoln's profile may reveal anomalies in the ear or jawline that shouldn't exist. The mint mark, that tiny D beneath the date, may show placement irregularities tied to specific die states. These aren't cosmetic quirks. These are fingerprints of a moment when machinery failed in just the right way. And when authenticated and graded at the highest levels, these coins don't trade hands casually. They disappear into private collections, investment portfolios, and vaults. Here's where the story takes a sharp turn. Over the years, verified high-grade error specimens tied to the 1997 D Lincoln cent have been documented in elite collector circles and private transactions at astonishing valuations. Not public auctions you read about online. Quiet deals, off-market sales, coins exchanged between people who understand exactly what they're buying and exactly why it matters. In those circles, numbers approaching $3 million are not dismissed as fantasy. They are discussed in hushed, serious tones, because in that world, condition is king, documentation is power, and rarity is everything. You might be thinking, come on, it's a penny, and that skepticism is healthy. But let me ask you this, if it were so obviously valuable, would anyone still have one sitting in a jar? The most powerful treasures in American numismatics are often invisible to the untrained eye. They look boring, they feel light, they make no noise when dropped on a table, and that's exactly how they survive unnoticed for decades. There's a kind of fear that creeps in at this point, and it's not fear of loss, it's fear of ignorance, the fear that somewhere, sometime, you spent something extraordinary as if it were nothing. A penny given as change, a penny donated, a penny lost between couch cushions. That fear is real, and collectors live with it every day. But there's another emotion, stronger than fear, and that's urgency, because every year, fewer untouched 1997 pennies remain. They're damaged, circulated, corroded, or destroyed. Time is not neutral. Time is the enemy of condition. Now let's reset for a moment, because this is where people's attention usually drifts. Quick reality check. How many times have you actually looked closely at a penny, not glanced at it, looked at it? If the answer is almost never, you're not alone. That's the joke of it all. America's most overlooked coin may also be one of its most quietly powerful wealth vehicles. Kind of ironic, isn't it? The coin we bend, scratch, and ignore might be the one that buys freedom. Back to the story. As the years passed, professional grading services began identifying specific 1997 cents with extraordinary characteristics. Not thousands of them, not even dozens, a microscopic population. Coins that survived in near-perfect condition, combined with specific error signatures, became unicorns. And unicorns don't come cheap. When these coins appear, even whispers of availability send shockwaves through collector networks. Phones ring, emails fly, offers escalate, because missing one of these opportunities isn't just missing a coin, it's missing a once-in-a-lifetime asset. This is where excitement starts to overpower logic. People realize that wealth doesn't always announce itself with gold bars and vault doors. Sometimes it hides in copper and zinc, sometimes it hides in mistakes, and sometimes it hides in the things we were taught not to value. The Lincoln cent tells a larger American story, a story of industry, error, chance, and reward. It's capitalism frozen in metal, and just when you think you understand the full picture, here's the cliffhanger most people never see coming. Not all valuable 1997 pennies have been found. Not even close. The majority are likely still out there, sitting in drawers, piggy banks, inherited collections, and estate boxes that haven't been opened since the 1990s. Every time an old collection changes hands without being examined, the possibility of a multi-million-dollar coin slips quietly through history. So what separates the people who benefit from this knowledge from those who don't? Awareness, action, and timing. Knowing what to look for before everyone else does. Because once a coin is recognized, certified, and publicized, the window closes, the market adjusts, the opportunity disappears, and the next person gets the headline. There's a strange kind of humor in all of this. Imagine telling your younger self that one day, a penny could outperform stocks, real estate, and savings accounts combined. You'd laugh. Yet here we are, and the laughter fades quickly when numbers like $3 million enter the conversation. Suddenly, the smallest denomination in American currency demands respect. If you're watching this and thinking, I might have old pennies somewhere, that thought isn't random, it's instinct. It's the quiet realization that wealth doesn't always come from earning more. Sometimes it comes from recognizing what you already own. And the people who act on that instinct are the ones who change their lives. Because the truth is, the 1997 Lincoln 1-cent penny isn't just a coin, it's a test of attention, a test of curiosity, a test of whether you dismiss the ordinary or investigate it. Somewhere out there, a single copper coin is waiting for the right hands, the right eyes, and the right moment. The only question left is simple, unsettling, and powerful. What if that penny is already yours, a broken bar, and you just haven't looked closely enough yet?